Okay,
Yes, sir.
awesome, awesome. So do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Erica Knowles. Oops. I am the founder and creator of Collective Drift, which celebrates international women, culture, and travel. So
Okay.
I'm from Miami, Florida. I've lived abroad in Peru and Thailand, and I created the Collective Drift platform to bring together women of different cultures and different ethnic backgrounds to share their stories on the Collective Drift podcast, which is on youtube.com/, Collective Drift.
Awesome, awesome. So, for those who are just tuning in at the moment, this is Anita with Black Travel Summit, and we are meeting with Erica from Collective Drift, the founder of Collective Drift. So, tell us a bit about how you began your journey with Collective Drift.
So, wow, so that's like a long story. So, I moved abroad in 2010. I moved to Peru and I lived in Lima, Peru. And I also, I want to say that it started, I would say the seed of it started there.
Hmm.
I got a few friends together. There was a restaurant owner that I built a relationship that was around the corner from the apartment that I stayed at called Raffos. And I invited a few friends and I was like, we're going to have a women's brunch. And
Mm.
those friends then invited other friends. And I want to say we had about 10 or 15 women at this tiny restaurant. We had the whole second floor to ourselves and this custom menu. But we were all women from different parts of the world. And we had this like great conversation. I mean, I got really good friends from it that I hadn't like known before. Like now I have one of my best friends from Peru lives in the Philippines. She's from Austria. She's half Austrian, half Filipino. She was there, and that's where I met her. So I think that's the seed of it. But after that, I lived in Thailand. I got to meet other great women. And I really, after I moved back to the US in
Hmm.
2014 and just fell into media. I started working for Legacy Magazine and MIA
Hmm.
Magazine. I ended up being the editor in chief and publisher. I'd never been professionally in media before. I interned at 99 Jams. So that was my first time in media. Um, and ended up being the leader of this, great publication. Worked at another business publication after that, and was like, "Whoa, what are we doing here?" Like
Hmm.
corporate world, we're having these interviews, meeting great people, but the conversations um, are not really inspiring me. And I will tell you that I met with two men, two white men. I will tell you, one um, the managing partner for an accountant firm. Um, an accountant law firm. So I mean, he's like
Hmm.
math, business, law. And then the
Mm.
other gentleman was the CEO of UHealth. And I literally had the same conversation with both of them. One of them, Bobby, he's like one of my best friends now. We're talking and we're just talking about travel randomly. And he's like, "What are you doing here? Like, why are you here?" And this is the first time or the second time I met him. And I'm like, "Oh, like, this is my job. This is what I do." He's like, "No, but why are you here? Like, you shouldn't be here. Like, you shouldn't be in Miami. And you
Hmm.
shouldn't be doing this job." And I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm going to do this collective drift thing eventually, blah, blah, blah." He's like, "Yeah, that's what you should be doing." And then the other guy, Dr. Alschuler, and no, sorry, that was the previous, Dr. Armstrong from the
Hmm.
CEO at UHealth was like, he just come back from vacation. So I'm talking to him about his vacation. It's just a little warm up chit chat. And he's like, "Well, why are you here?" And I'm like, he's like, "What are you doing this? Like, this isn't what you're supposed to
Hmm.
be doing. This is the
Mm.
CEO of a hospital and a
Wow.
healthcare program, like one of the biggest in the world, like UHealth, University of Miami Health." And he's like, "What are you
Wow.
doing
Yeah.
here?" I'm like, "Oh, well, eventually I want to do this collective drifting." And he's like, "Yeah, that's what you should be doing." I'm
That is
like,
awesome.
and like these men are in these traditional fields where you would think
Hmm.
that they would say, be a doctor, be a lawyer. They're like, "No, go through this travel magazine thing that you've been talking about." And the crazy, have you read The Alchemist?
I have read parts of it. I haven't finished.
So
Don't
I
judge.
was reading The Alchemist when that happened.
Hmm. Wow. That is amazing. That is crazy. So Okay, so throughout your process, you've lived in Peru, you've lived in Thailand, and I can kind of connect with that in regards to the whole living abroad. You know, of course, I come from the UK, I live in the States now, and I've even spent, my mother's family is from the Seychelles, so I've spent like months there at a time as well. So I kind of understand that connection and having those different experiences living abroad. What kind of advice do you think that you can give people who may want to venture out there and eventually live abroad, or who are thinking about it and thinking, oh man, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to live? You know, do I find a job? This, and that. What are some of the things that you did in order to kind of keep you going and, you know, keep you afloat financially, emotionally, mentally?
while I was living abroad.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
when I left my job,
Mm.
I was working for Newark Now, a nonprofit that was in Newark, New Jersey. And I told them about 2 months before I left that I was going to be leaving. And
Hmm.
they didn't believe me. So they never interviewed anyone for my position.
Mm.
And the last 2 weeks before I left, I guess they finally realized that I was actually leaving.
Yeah.
And I was married at the time, and
Hmm.
I was like, okay, this is the last 2 weeks. And they finally started interviewing, and they didn't find anybody to replace me. This was kind of when Facebook was just starting. This was like 2010, where businesses were
Mm-hmm.
just starting to get into it. So I was the development person, and was doing Facebook also. So I was doing fundraising
Hmm.
and also doing the Facebook, because there wasn't that social media role at that time. So we agreed that I would continue doing Facebook when I went abroad. So I kept a like a retainer basically to do
Yeah.
Facebook while
Oh,
I lived
cool.
abroad. So I would do that on a daily basis, and then I also had another client where I was interested in doing branding at the time, and that was something that I could do abroad. But I also brought on someone else to do the public relations for them, to be the main client interface. And
Hmm.
so she got a piece of business, I got a piece of the business,
Hmm.
and I went abroad. But then so that kind of covered all of our apartment expenses and things like
Hmm.
that, because rent was only like $700 a month, which was,
Okay, man.
yeah. So Peru is a place where you can kind of break even. It's not going to be super cheap. Thailand is super cheap. You can actually save money in
Yeah.
Thailand. Peru, you can go there and make enough to live and live off of the economy. Um,
Hmm.
but in Peru, I taught. I taught English to adults. Anybody can go there and do that. I want to say at the time you had to leave um, every year or so, maybe more
Hmm.
often than that. But I want to say every year you have to leave the country in order for your visa to stay valid. And that just means you have to go to another country and come back. But there's a lot of individuals that are there that may be there with a residency, because they may
Hmm.
have dated someone and now are married, but they found their way to have this legitimate way of being there.
Hmm.
Or it may be a Peruvian that has an English course themselves. So I would teach English to adults in the morning or after work. So before they went to work or after they went to work, I would teach them. I mean, I even got a client just being in the mall because everybody wants to speak English. So I was in
Yeah.
line, and the woman was like, hey, you speak English. Can you teach me English? And I ended up teaching her as well. She was right near some of my other clients. But that's how I um, I was able to live financially. In terms of mentally, I actually started a Facebook group when I was in Peru. That's a private Facebook group, so I won't share it because we're still pretty active. Um, and I was on there talking with them. I mean, I stayed in contact with my family while I was abroad,
Hmm.
and then of course creating that close group of friends while I was in Peru. It's really I thought I was going to go there and make a lot of like Peruvian friends, but I ended up
Hmm.
going there and making a lot of friends that were more so expats. So not necessarily American expats, but expats that all expats are having like similar experiences.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So tell, this is something that sometimes I have a little bit of difficulty explaining, like when people are like, oh, so how was it living in the UK, or how was it living in the Seychelles? I mean, these are always experiences that I feel like people just need to kind of like get out. and experience. And, when people are like, oh, so do you prefer the UK over the US? Or, it's like, I can't, like, you can't choose
Right.
sometimes. It's weird. It's like the love, like sometimes you may have like a love and hate relationship with where you're staying, where you're from, where you're currently living. How was your experiences in Peru and in Thailand? What would you say your experiences were like? And especially a person of color as well.
Right. So choosing Peru, we were planning on going to South America. So the plan was South
Hmm.
America. And as a person of color, and I really did a lot of research in terms of where I wanted to live, being
Hmm.
a Black woman.
Yeah.
And there was a series that was out, like a documentary that was out at the time, that was about Blacks in Latin America, and they had like
Hmm.
they were talking about like my Black, the Black grandmother in Mexico,
Yeah.
and all of these different places in South America. And I watched that series, and that was what really informed me.
Hmm.
Peru definitely has its prejudices in terms of racism, um,
Hmm.
but when I did that research, it seemed like it was the lesser of the countries that had those issues. Um, but I'll tell you, when getting there, it was definitely. Somebody's asking if I remember the series name. I do not, and I really need to look that up. But if you like Google blacks in South America, I'll try to
Hmm.
Google it on here while we do. I don't know, or someone else knows the name of it. Um, but um, it was there was a striking difference in terms of the time that we were in. While I was in Peru, the movie The Help came out, and I can tell you that at that time in Peru, things were still happening that were like that. I have a
Okay.
really good friend who I'm still friends with now.
Hmm.
She's a Peruvian woman that at one point had two mates. I didn't realize she was going through like a training at the time, but she had two mates. And the day I went to visit her, they have a back door and a front door. All the houses have these doors, like for the help to go in and out, right?
Hmm.
Um, Her husband didn't allow the maids to use their plates. He came from like a really high aristocratic class. Um, they couldn't use the bathroom. They couldn't eat at dinner. But then
Oh, wow.
the wonderful thing, like, and you say, oh, wow. And I said, oh, wow, too, right? But
But
once
this is
I
like
had the
normal.
dialogue with her about
Yeah.
it, it was like she grew up with her maids sitting at the same table as her and her family, because they were a middle class family and they didn't
Hmm.
have the extra space. But if you look at it from both perspectives, from the family's perspective of, do I want to eat dinner with my employees all the time? I want to have these personal conversations. They shouldn't necessarily be around these personal conversations. Or even as the employee, do you want to be around your boss all the time? So not necessarily. So we might look at it from this lens of America and we know everything,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily the right thing. Um, and I spoke to a mentor at the time, and she was like, Erica, like, you come from the free world, and like there's a reason why America is the free world, and that, is simply because of that. Um, but I also had advantages, um, as being a Black American woman. At this point, I
Hmm.
will tell you, being in Peru was the first time I felt American, so to say, not Black
Mm. That's
American or
interesting.
African
Yeah.
American, because I was able to have this conversation with this upper class Peruvian woman. They did invite me to, what is it? There's this Peruvian gentlemen's club, not a strip club, but a gentlemen's club, um,
Hmm.
that even one of the presidents wasn't allowed to become a member. And I went to dinner there. I went to her baby shower at this, like, her husband's family home, which was like basically this castle. Imagine there being a house in Times Square and
Hmm.
someone still owning that house. They basically own that house in Peru.
Wow.
But in Thailand, that was a little different. I promise. Like that was definitely. I mean, in Peru, men still flirted with me. Like I was still common there. Like I mean, not common. There's still black people there. There's much more of a divide in Peru,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of segregation. Like black people definitely do live in more of one city. That's Chincha, which I love Chincha. If you ever go to Peru, you go for Verano Negro, which is Black Summer, and you go to Chincha. Um, but in Thailand, like there's definitely that's where I learned about brown. Like this Black American thing we think we have going on, or this African descent thing that we think is our problem, is really a struggle around the world. Like in Peru, I mean, I'm sorry, in Thailand, it's called dam, and which means that you're dark. And they believe in Thailand that if you're dark, that means you've worked outside. I mean, come on, seriously. This was like 2011. You're dark because you work outside, not because you were born like that. No, like, but this is what's ingrained. And people, like, literally, my ex-husband was really dark skinned, so people really stared at him and he hated it. And never really got completely used to it. I was a little bit more comfortable with it. But I had a time where one of my students, I was teaching at a school there, like a K through 12 school, and this girl who loved me to death, I mean, she would jump on me, like, because they're allowed to hug the students there. She would jump on me, hug me and everything. And one day we're making pizza and she has the flour and she's like sprinkling flour on my hand. And I'm like, why do you, and I would knock it off and she would sprinkle it on my hand again. And she's like, I'm like, why are you doing that? She's like, teacher, you're not pretty, not beautiful. And she's like trying to make me white. Woo! There's like, yeah. So there's like white, Thai. So in Asia, there is definitely a white thing that's going on, and I don't think it's necessarily a European thing.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt as well. That's really interesting you say that because, okay, so, and sorry, I'm covering my face here, but okay, so me and my partner went to Thailand for the first time last year. And for those who don't know, I'm an anthropologist by, by study and by nature as well. I actually discovered that there is a group of Black Thais, and they are the Aboriginals of that country, and they call themselves the Manit people. Most Thais don't know, or most modern Thais, because the Thais that live there now came from the north. Most modern Thais don't know about this Aboriginal group, and those who do often associate their skin either with, I won't delve into it, but some religious aspects. But then also, like you said, with working outside, with being outside, with being, they call it sakai, which is also what they call them in Malaysia as well, but it means savage, it means slave, it means, barbarian. And they're often associated with being in the jungle or being jungle dwellers. Okay, so kind of going back to this relationship between being dark and being outside, how did that make you feel, because this isn't, like you said, this isn't a European country. This is Asia, they have darker skinned people who have sunshine.
It just, I mean, it made me very aware of it. I mean, I would go to 7-Eleven because that's like the corner store, and it's your drugstore, and it's your grocery store. I would go to 7-Eleven and I couldn't buy lotion because it had bleach in it. You couldn't buy deodorant.
Yeah.
You couldn't buy any skincare product without it having bleach in it. So I had to go to Boots, which is a European drugstore, in order to get my pharmaceutical needs. It made me feel bad for them. Like I have, like I said, I have friends in Thailand, and one of them like took me and my friends out on a tour and everything. And like, I mean, I won't speak about people specifically, like, but we're outside and it's 90 degrees outside, 100 degrees outside, and she's got on a full length sweater because she doesn't want to get dark. So, and then also at the time, I had gained weight. I gained about 30 pounds in Peru. Let me tell you, Peruvian food will put some weight on you. So I was probably about 20 pounds more than I am right now. Excuse me.
Mm.
But yeah, Peruvian food will put some weight on you. And Thailand is not about that. It's about being about this small.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember being in the store one time and I got like an extra large skirt. Like, you know me, imagine me in an extra large. Like, I
Yeah.
was trying on an extra
Mm.
large shirt. Like, forget that whole American things that make a two, someone that's a six really a two. No. They were like, here. And the lady was like, no, you need an XXL. I was like, huh? I was like, no, I don't. Whatever. So I get this. So, and on top of that, so I'm black, I'm dark
Mhm.
skinned, I'm overweight. Um, oh, and the cops are pulling over my taxis. And like, you know, the like in a drinking stop,
Yeah.
cops are pulling over my taxi because there's black people sitting in the back seat. They're pulling them over for us
Mhm.
to check to see if we're actually like supposed to be there. So they thought we were like Nigerian. I want to say there's a lot of Nigerian or other Africans. They just thought we were African. We weren't American. Even though Obama was a president, we couldn't
At
be.
the
You
time.
could put him on the phone with someone with another Thai teacher that I was working with, and they didn't believe we were American because we were
Okay.
black, because we were dark skinned, and
Okay.
how it affected.
That's,
Mhm.
that's crazy as well.
And I'm sorry. So roaming with Romy, hey Romy, I love Romy. She stated that it's funny because in America, blackness is almost like a silent identity. But
Mhm.
when you're abroad, it's like the blackness fades into the background while the American identity kind of comes forth. And it's interesting that you stated that they didn't believe you were American.
Yeah, I would say that happens in Peru, in South America. That didn't
Yeah.
happen in Thailand. In Thailand, I was black.
It's that
I
perception
mean,
of blackness as well.
I was. I'm sorry, huh?
I feel like it's that perception of blackness. It's what they come across the most. And
Right, and it
I
wasn't
think,
like, oh, I'm black in terms of like African American. It was, you're dark skinned. You're not light
Yeah.
skinned. You're not white Thai. That's what's preferable. It's more preferable for you to be light skinned. Like that's what
Mhm.
I wasn't. I mean, no one hit on me in Thailand. I think the maids hit on me and the dark skinned moms because they loved that I was there. The women that worked in the school because they
Mhm.
were like, "Ooh, it's a brown woman," and I mean, these people might have been like, you know, I don't even have that color lightness on me. They were still light, like what we would consider white, but they were a
Mhm.
few shades darker than their other Thai
Mhm.
people. But they were glad that I was there because they looked at me as a role model for the little shade darker brown people, like
That's
light people.
beautiful.
They were still training. I mean, I had one of my co-teachers would put on makeup that was like a few shades lighter to make herself lighter. I mean, this is so you think that this is only an American problem or a European Afro descent problem, but it's
Mhm.
really not. This color problem is a problem around the world. And I don't think I knew how much it affected me until like hindsight coming back to the US. I was back in Miami. I hadn't lived in Miami for 16 years and I was
Wow.
fresh meat. I was separated from my husband.
Mhm.
And it was like, did you watch True Blood?
Oh, yeah.
So there's a character in True Blood called Sookie. Y'all, she didn't watch True Blood. Oh my gosh. But the vampires kept going after her because she was like this royal Sookie, fairy blood thing or whatever. It was
Uh-huh.
crazy. Like I would go out and at least five guys would try to like tolerate me, talk to me. I just was not used to the attention.
Yeah.
I went from like some attention in Peru, no attention in Thailand. Come on,
Mhm.
you know. Husband was also like you fat. Like no. And then I went to Miami and it was like, ah! And then, so I had to adjust from Thailand, then adjust to this Miami thing. And
Mhm.
then go, oh, okay, it's time to chill out. Like now you're readjusted and back to being yourself. But that, like, it took a minute.
Oh, that's crazy. Okay.
so what are some of the skill sets or some of the experiences that you've had here in the States prior to you moving, whether it be in the workplace, in your social kind of like environments? Do you feel like there are any skill sets that kind of prepared you for living abroad?
for living abroad, in terms of like being able to network, I think that like I've always, my dad was the like, government relations director at the Dolphin Stadium when I grew up, and community relations director. And then also I had another mentor, Michelle Swaby, and they always had me with other adults and like networking. So it's almost like one of those things, like those things you learn in kindergarten or you do life. But I think networking and being able to make those types of connections really did help me in terms of living abroad. One of the first things when I got to Peru, I was connected with someone who used to work at the embassy in Peru. And she had just left, and she introduced me to some other people that lived in Peru that worked at the embassy. And so I became friends with them, and those were part of my core network. Then moving to Thailand, they also introduced me to people that the people that worked for the embassy in Peru introduced me to people that worked for the embassy in Thailand. And there was actually a group called Black Americans in Thailand. And we had like a Black History Month program. There was like 100 people or so. I mean, it might have been $100 ticket. We had spades nights on different times and barbecue nights. So it's really the networking, that really, I would say that skill set really helped me in Peru and Thailand. Also, plain and simple, speaking English and having a professional persona, like being able to, especially when I say speaking, I'm speaking about teaching in Peru, and being able to have a professional background and be able to be a professional person when teaching adults. I ended up having a client that was the owner of the second largest marketing research firm, and I helped him with preparing some of his speeches that he had to do in English in, I want to say Spain or something. He had to do the speech in English. So I was able to help him with that because of my professional experience. And people trusted me because of my professional demeanor. That's the word.
So do you feel as though you were more kind of, I mean, once you get past this whole like idea of, you know, your blackness, do you feel like you were more sought after because of your experience in America and because of your education in America?
In Peru, I would say that may have helped with getting certain clients, but mainly, and knowing how to speak proper English is the main thing that helps. As long as you're a native English speaker, and you have, I think even with a high school education, you can go teach abroad, like anywhere in the world. Not anywhere, but most places. Because I want to say, like UAE, you have to be a certified teacher. Like my sister went and taught in the UAE. But in Peru, in Thailand, you have to have a degree, depending on the school or the program. But Peru, you're teaching under the table, basically, I would say, for the most part. And they'll hire you. In Thailand, I was teaching above board, like I was teaching legit. I actually had like a visa and everything. But most schools, you don't even have to do that. There's a lot of people who teach in Thailand that country hop, so they leave after the time limit and they go to Laos. But I would say networking and just like that professionalism did help with living abroad.
So are there any challenges that you face working abroad that you haven't faced working here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one being, someone asked did I work for an organization. Yes, I worked for, in Thailand, I worked for DSIL, which is a Drunk Shalan Sky. Yeah, I'm not going to say that. DSIL, which is a school in Thailand, which is it is a project-based learning school or constructivism school. And in Peru, I worked for, and they're easy to find. Like you go on Craigslist or you go into some like teaching thing, and there's multiple companies. I worked for 2 or 3 different companies when I was in Peru. But wait, so your question, were there any challenges? In Peru, I would say the challenge in Peru really was simply teaching people before work started. That was fine. But then going back home for the rest of the day, so going back home from 10 to 5, and then at 5 o'clock saying, get your butt up and go teach somebody else. Like, in the beginning, that was all cool. But at the end, that did kind of get like, I don't want to do this no more. Like, and then I'm getting on somebody's bus. Like, I wasn't driving. So that's the difference between like teaching legit. Like if you're working at a school like in UAE or working, like there's people who teach. So if you're a teacher, you can go teach abroad and they're going to fly you out and they're going to pay you like a salary that you get here or even more. And you're going to be set up. You might even have a driver. But doing it the other way, which I did it, let's say it's like the backpacker way, you're not going to have all of that. So I would take the bus or like, which if you're in Miami, you know about the jitney. So like I took something comparable to the jitney, but worse. Let's say like 100 times worse. And sometimes, I mean, it was packed like sardines. Like it was ridiculous. And sometimes it was okay. But at rush hour traffic trying to go teach somebody. So that's what got old in Peru. In Thailand, working in Thailand, and you know, my Thai friends that are watching and listening, you know, I love you. But Thai culture is very different from American or Western culture, and that took quite a bit for me to adapt to. There's a lot of group thought, so like we actually had, I remember having a meeting that was 30 minutes long where we talked about whether or not we should use plastic forks during lunch or silverware during lunch for the students. Like longer than a half an hour. And then no decision was made because there is this group thing that happens, but then there's also this top-down hierarchy thing that happens where only the person at the top can make a decision. So that was very like frustrating. So they're very much I mean, and that's why it's the land of smiles, because you like smile about everything and nothing is wrong. If you make a suggestion, it's a complaint. And I remember while I was there, I watched an episode of The Cosby Show, and Claire was kind of teaching something like to the girls about like standing up for themselves, or maybe like, well, why didn't you say whatever? And I was like, wow, like I was even taught through like the TV shows that I watch to think outside of the box and to be who I am. And that's ingrained in me. And that was what was really difficult in Thailand in terms of working in Thailand, was getting over that, like, okay, they're saying the sky is yellow, but it's really blue. And I'm not allowed to let anybody know that it's blue.
Okay, interesting. So I see questions and comments coming through. Thank you so much, everybody. We are going to cover majority of the questions towards the end. And I see, I love you too. Thank you, Romy. Now I heard you talking about like, you know, some of the experiences that you had, like being in Thailand, being in Peru. And it kind of brought me back to when I was living in the Seychelles for a bit. And you would be on the bus and there would be no space, no seats on the bus, and people would just come and sit on your lap. And you don't know these people from a can of paint, but they're like, there's no space on the bus, and come sit on your lap. And it's just regular. I'm like, okay, somebody's sitting on my lap, that's fine, you know, but it's like that kind of like, what is the norm to you, and then what is the norm to somebody else? Right. So I wanted to kind of go back to Collective Drift and the movement that you have going with the Collective Drift. You have this thing called Authentic Experiences. Tell the people a little bit about that.
So in terms of, you mean in terms of the events or in terms of like sharing authentic?
Exactly, and sharing authentic experiences as well.
Okay. So with Collective Drift, I do have events and I do have the podcast, and part of both of those things are about sharing authentic experiences. and with a diverse group of women. So living in Peru, living in Thailand, spending time abroad in different places, everyone is taught different things. Just like how I was saying that, you know, I was taught, you know, to think outside of the box versus people in Thailand may have not been taught that way. But even like things like meditation, like I went there and I went on a week-long meditation retreat, which I was a silent meditation retreat, which I will never do again. But I definitely learned how to do like a mindfulness meditation. So there are things that other people can teach, people from different cultures can teach you that you wouldn't have learned from your own background. So I think it's important to be open to learning about other people's experiences and what other people have learned. So that's really what the Collective Drift podcast does. So I interview women that are from different ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, and talk to them, and women that are involved in the arts, culture, travel, and wellness specifically, to talk to them about their cultural background, about being a woman in their culture, as well as their travel experiences, and maybe a little bit about their art and their work that they're currently doing. In the Collective Drift events, we have similar conversations about life, about art, about travel. And then I also, so that was like, I had an event called Collective Drift, which was called The Art of Becoming a Woman, a Rum Punch French, which was an amazing event during Art Basel, and which was co-hosted by 10 other women that I had come in from different cultural backgrounds. The goal was to have the room as diverse as possible. Just naturally, more of my friends are African American or African descent. And so having those co-hosts come in and help out and make that room more colorful definitely broadened the conversation and made the pictures look better. And people enjoyed their time. I also have an event called Travel Chat Dine, and that event is where we talked about authentic travel experiences.
That was amazing.
Thank you. You attended. I'm so glad you came. I appreciate it. And everyone talked about how to have authentic travel experiences at that event. And it wasn't like a panelist event. I shouldn't say never, because maybe I'll do something in the future with that. But I really try not to have panelists. I try to, because the people that are attending are people that travel usually. There may be someone who has it every once in a while, but there's enough experts in the room. Like everyone has an experience that they can share. And so we all talked about things. We talked about things such as travel safety and just having like a gut instinct and following that through. But even how to have authentic travel experiences. Like for one, I highly recommend, if you're comfortable, to use when the time is appropriate. I would say I love hotels, and there's a time for them, and sometimes that's usual. But when you want to have an authentic travel experience, like maybe try out an Airbnb where you're staying with the host. Because a lot of times what I've experienced is that people treat you like family, and they like go above and beyond to help you out. I've even done couch surfing where like one of the hosts that I stayed with actually drove me to my next destination, took me out for breakfast, like paid for everything, like stayed in line, like it was like really just loving and caring for me. And so it was a great experience. And you don't necessarily, like I said, you can stay at a hotel and you can still do couch surfing, and you can still do Airbnb. Like with Airbnb now, they have Airbnb experiences where you can have, and every time I've done Airbnb experience, it's pretty much been a one-on-one. Maybe one other person and me was with the other person doing a tour. So those are great ways to really get to know someone. They even have like the cooking classes. So I did that in Turkey. That was really cool. But couch surfing, you can meet up, which is free. You can meet up with someone for coffee, and then go out and have them take you on a tour. There's several websites where they have individuals do that, and rather than just doing like a scripted tour company. And I think that's really a great way to learn about culture, take a dance class, take a
Yeah.
class while you're somewhere, like really, get to know people.
Mhm.
One of the best things I want to say before and that is, like, before going somewhere, look up like when festivals are, because that's when people are out and about. And I
Yeah.
don't mean like carnival's great, right? That's
Mhm.
huge. Oh my gosh, yes. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be something that big. Like when
Mhm.
I was going to India, I looked up festivals, and there happened to be this festival called the Mewar Festival. And
Uh-huh.
I went and I changed my itinerary to go to Udaipur, which I had no plans on going to Udaipur, and
Mhm.
ended up in this wonderful city. It's like the Venice of Italy. They filmed a James Bond movie there because there's this lake, and they have like a hotel in the middle of the lake and a palace in the middle of the lake. And it's just, and I was there for this festival where people are holding these statues on their head, and um, it's for like for harvest, but then also
Mhm.
for for like monogamy, to keep them in
Mhm.
monogamous. But people were out. There was a Ferris wheel that was man powered. Like it was like there was a guy like on a bicycle or something that was like powering the Ferris wheel out on
It's
the street, and
crazy.
just like eating the food, and they're like here, try this. Like especially in India, like people are really interactive. I think one, because they speak English, but then they're also like just
Yeah.
part of their personality. They want to take pictures with you. That can also get a little bit overwhelming. At the end of it, I did feel like Beyonce, and I was like, no, no more pictures. But at first, it was kind of cool. I must say. But it was fun. Um, so definitely find a festival or two and go somewhere when
Mhm.
there's a festival.
That's
It's really dope. Okay, so moving kind of not moving on to, but like kind of going back to the whole discussion about collective drift as a whole, as an event experience, and then also
Mhm.
the podcast you have going on. What are some things that you can tell some people? Now, not everybody, there are a lot of people who are happy with what they're doing. They're passionate about what they're doing, their 9 to 5. Um, and they want to stick with that. But then there are also some people who are like, hey, I love traveling so much as a passion. Like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. I don't know if I want to go into the field of traveling, but I do know that I want to do something that is going to give me the flexibility to be
Mm-hmm.
able to maneuver a little more freely without having to tell somebody, hey, or ask somebody, can I go during this time? What is some advice that you can give to those people who are trying to escape the 9 to 5 or a job that they're not particularly happy with, about becoming an entrepreneur and just doing your own thing? And your thing, which is great, Collective Drift, it's travel related. What advice can you give to people who are trying to kind of move into the entrepreneurial space?
Absolutely. One, I think that like a lot of people are like, you have to plan, you have to plan, you have to plan, you have to save up this money, you have to do all of this, and you have to have this strategic plan set up. And I
Mhm.
would say like you can do that if you're in a good space. Like before I left my job, I wasn't in a good space, so I didn't do
Hmm.
that. I I would say I lucked out. I bought a house when I first graduated from college,
Hmm.
and this was the time I was able to cash in on it. And I sold
Yeah.
that house, and I was able to, and I purchased another house before I left
Yeah.
my job. And I was able to leave my job with some cash and start
Hmm.
planning then. I wasn't mentally able to plan while I was there. And a lot of
Hmm.
people really stress that. And I think it is important, but you have to also know your limitations when you're in a certain, when you're experiencing trauma, so to say. Um, you need to exit that,
Yeah.
right? So I want to start by saying that, like, do what you're capable of doing.
Hmm.
Um, two, it's finding what you're passionate about. Like, do you know what you love to do? Like, if you can do anything that you do here, you can do there. Like,
Hmm.
when I was living in Thailand, there was one person that knew how to do black hair. One person. And that was a Thai woman who was taught by a black woman who had left. She was the only
Hmm.
person that I knew of after doing research, like that was doing black hair. And like that's why it was natural, like when I went abroad, was because I had nobody to do my hair.
Yeah.
You know. And even in Peru, like the woman that was braiding hair, like they were using this like baby doll hair. I tell y'all, if y'all know how to braid some hair and do some hair, you could go abroad and do some hair because it is needed anywhere. I mean, if you think of, and speaking of like to a black audience, if you can think of anything that black people need that is very specific to African Americans or Afro, like Europeans, that are used to a certain quality of African products, African diaspora aimed products or services. If you go to a city with an embassy, there are some black folks there that need your services. Plain and simple. You can go and teach English if you want to. Sure. Anybody, everybody can go teach English, and you can go figure it out there. You can actually make money teaching English in Thailand. Like I walked out, I'll tell you, I walked out with like $10,000 after living in Thailand for a year and a half.
That's dope.
Yeah, that was me. My ex-husband were together. We only spent my money. We saved all of his money. I also, I also was, I had my contract with the nonprofit. I actually went back to fundraising for them.
Nice.
But yeah, go teach, figure it out there. Just go. You can go for a year and teach. Like, you don't want to be a teacher. I never wanted to be a teacher. It was actually fun teaching the kids. Like, but the school I taught at was on a trimester system. It was a trimester based system. So every 3 months we could take vacation.
Oh, what?
That's why I chose the school, because every 3 months we could take a vacation. So every 3 months I went to a different country. So you're going to tell me I don't like to teach and I'm going to not take that job? Like, come on, y'all go teach and figure out something else to do while you're there. But in this time of quarantine and coronavirus, like we're all learning that we can work remotely. Like a lot of jobs are going to be moving to remote work. So find, if your job isn't going to stick to this remote work, then find something that is. If you don't want to be, every entrepreneur life isn't for everyone.
Yeah.
So find something that will allow you to work remotely, and it can be so much less. Like there's jobs out there where you can work online at somebody's call center for like $18 an hour, for $12 an hour, and that's gonna make you like some good. It's not gonna be good money here. Like there's people who survive on it here, and we know that. But you can thrive somewhere else on that money.
That's so true.
I think mainly is like there's jazz singers. Like there was a black jazz singer in Thailand. She just left the country every year or whatever it is that you have to keep your visa current. Like you sing, go sing be the black jazz singer. Like, okay, so there's our stereotypes. We have our stereotypes, right? Like we are singers, right? We perform. Go perform. You a B singer? You a C singer? Go be that black singer. They gonna think you like Beyonce. Go take advantage of it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I really loved meeting with you today. One last question before we move on to the questions that, some of these people have been asking. We want to be able to make sure that we can get everything in as much as possible. Out of all, and I know you've already lived in some places, but out of everywhere that you have traveled to, where else would you live other than Peru and Thailand? Where else could you see yourself living? Like, what has been your favorite traveling experience?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So after living abroad, I have learned that I do love living in America in terms of long term. The whole freedom thing. Yeah. You see me not locked up like everybody else, even though it would be a good thing to be locked up a little bit more. I was like, this question, I've been thinking about it. One of my friends was saying South Africa. Yes. So I'm actually looking at moving to South Africa. I've never been there before. This is just out of the relationship that I'm in now. And actually really like the idea of South Africa. It's supposed to be one of the most Western, and I mean Cape Town specifically, because we do need to be very specific about the cities we're talking about. So I've heard Cape Town is like the Brazil, Miami of Africa. So I'm looking forward to that. In terms of places I've been, I would love to spend more time in India. I don't think I would want to live there for more than a year, maybe. I would like to spend more time in India. I want to go to South, like to Goa in the southern part of India. I had a great time in Sri Lanka as well. I call it India Light, but I know they've had a lot of some political issues there. So safety is something that, you know, you like when you think about these things, it's like, okay, where can I go? Where can I be safe? Where can I get the things that I need? Where can I brush my teeth with the water? I'm trying to think. I've learned that I don't like dry places, so it wouldn't. I thought I would love Morocco. I love Morocco, but I can't be in a dry place like that. Ghana, no. Egypt, Ethiopia, no. Maybe I would spend some more time in Ethiopia for sure. But I live there, no. Bali's beautiful. I could spend a year or two in Bali.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, for sure. I could spend a year or two in Bali. That like paradise is paradise. Yeah, I could scuba dive and learn how to surf, do some artwork. Yeah, I would say probably, like when people ask me like where to go, I'm like, yeah, India. India is my favorite place. I'm like, oh wait, everybody's not gonna love India. Go to Bali. Bali's beautiful. It's not expensive. It's absolutely beautiful. Bali, hands down. Yeah, Bali.
Okay.
Yeah, for like 2 years.
So if you haven't been to Bali, people, go to Bali. Go and look about living in Bali because Bali.
Jamaica, like, can we talk about the Caribbean? I would live in Jamaica. Yeah, I could retire in Jamaica for sure.
I know some of my Jamaican.
But I know we don't like as people in South Florida. You don't really think of the islands as being another country. That's another part of like Miami. But Jamaica, that's my second home. I've been there at least 5 or 6 times. Yeah. And I spend a lot of time in Germany now.
Cool. That's really dope. Okay, so we want to go to the some of the comments that was made. If anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to ask them right now or forever hold your peace. No, I'm joking. You can reach out to Erica.
Yeah, as well. Like, feel free.
Yeah,
and another thing that I do now as an entrepreneur, because like this, like entrepreneur space is kind of like, okay, you should also have a little side thing. So I sell CBD now. So DM me. You want some CBD?
You want some CBD, Erica? Okay, dope. All right, so some of the things that was said. Okay, cool. Black is beautiful. Yep. We know it. We know it. Somebody said we would be inside and my Asian friends would put sunblock on.
Yeah.
UV rays, man. Okay, so Romy with Romy says, so in your experience in Thailand, would you say that all Black people were seen as one Black monolith?
It depends on who. So when I lived in Thailand, I lived in Bangkok, but I lived in like an area outside of Bangkok, like like downtown Bangkok. So that's where I would get pulled over. They weren't used to seeing people of the African diaspora that were traveling. So I would say those people probably looked at Black people as one, like, you're just Black foreigner that's coming here to take my job or to be a prostitute or whatever. But in the city, like Bangkok proper, like more and more tourist areas where people are used to seeing Black people, I think, and Black travelers more specifically, they would probably notice the difference between someone who is there illegally, so to say. But even so that's why you don't like these words, because like when you're teaching abroad, you might be teaching a little like not properly, like you might be teaching under the table. So what makes your illegal different from someone else's illegal? So someone that's doing a more harmful type of crime, I should say, Yeah. So there's different types. If you're around people who know the difference between a tourist or a teacher
Mm-hmm.
and someone who is there that is like selling drugs or prostituting or
Mm-hmm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Well, again, thank you so much, Erica, for joining me today. We
Great
do this
question.
What's that?
Okay. I wonder if I have different questions than you do.
Maybe. Let's see. Okay, so I see Nikki says YOLO. In some
Okay, yeah,
parts,
that's
women
fine.
aren't as advanced as in other parts of the world. What would you say to women wanting to travel solo or living in those countries? Did you ever feel in danger or safe? That's a really good question.
So traveling solo, I've semi done that before. So now I'll travel with my boyfriend and he might be working during the day and I'll be in the city by myself. Um, that's why I do like finding like one of the Airbnb experiences. So I'm with someone else. But then also I'll go back to that comment we made earlier that, my friend Marshana brought up when we were at Travel Chat Time.
Sorry to cut you off, Erica. So we have 6 seconds remaining.